The pharmacist slid the paper back across the counter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. Your card was declined." I smiled awkwardly. That can't be right. He tried again. Same result. Behind me, the line grew longer. A young mother bounced a crying baby on her shoulder. An older man checked his watch. Someone sighed loudly. I felt every pair of eyes on my back. "It's only $214, I said quietly. "I'll call my son." The pharmacist nodded sympathetically. "Take your time." I stepped outside with my prescription bag still sitting on the counter. My hands were trembling, not from embarrassment, from surgery. 5 days earlier, surgeons had replaced my left hip after a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered it. The operation had gone well. Recovery depended on one thing: taking the medication exactly as prescribed. I pressed Daniel's number. He answered on the third ring. "Dad, make it quick. I'm at the pharmacy. My card isn't working. I only need $200 until Monday." Silence. Then, "Dad, I'm in the middle of something, I know. It'll only take a minute." Another pause. Then he laughed. "You seriously called me for $200? I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." His voice became impatient. "You've always been terrible with money. I've got expenses too. It isn't possible." I looked through the pharmacy window. The pharmacist was pretending not to watch. "I understand. I'll figure something out." "Good. Oh, and Dad, stop depending on me every time something goes wrong." He hung up. I stood there staring at the dark screen, not angry, just confused, because Daniel earned more in a month than I had earned in some years. $200 wasn't impossible. It was inconvenient. Apparently, so was I. An hour later, I managed to pay for the medication, not because Daniel called back, because the pharmacist quietly removed one of the prescriptions. "You can survive a few days without this one." He smiled kindly. "Come back when you can." I thanked him, but all the way home, one question stayed in my mind. What had been so important that my son couldn't spare $200? I found out that evening, not because Daniel told me, because everyone else did. My daughter Claire sent me a photograph. No message, just a photograph. Daniel stood in front of his father-in-law's house. Beside him, a brand new black pickup truck with a giant red bow across the hood. His father-in-law, Gary, was laughing with tears in his eyes. The caption underneath read, "Happy retirement, Dad. Nobody deserves it more." I looked at the truck. Luxury package, 4-wheel drive. Top trim, easily $70,000. My phone buzzed. Claire finally texted. "Dad, I didn't know he'd say no to your medicine. I thought you should see this before someone else sends it." I enlarged the picture. Daniel had one arm around Gary's shoulder. The same son who couldn't spare $200 had just bought another man a truck. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of the pain, because memories kept arriving one after another. Daniel was 8 when his mother died. After the funeral, he refused to sleep in his own room. For almost a year, he slept on the old sofa because he said it still smelled like her perfume. Every night I'd carry him back to bed after he fell asleep. When he was 16, he wanted to quit school after failing mathematics. I spent 6 months sitting beside him every evening learning algebra all over again just so I could help. When he opened his first restaurant, the bank rejected his loan. Not once, twice. I didn't have $70,000. I had something else. My retirement. I cashed out nearly everything. Not because it was a good investment, because he was my son. I never asked for it back. Never mentioned it again. Until the pharmacy. Until the truck. Until I realized something that hurt more than the surgery. Daniel hadn't forgotten what I'd done for him. He had simply decided someone else mattered more. 3 mornings later, the doorbell rang. Not at my house. At the small apartment above my old accounting office. Nobody rented it anymore. I mostly used it for storage. When I opened the door, a young woman in a navy business suit stood there holding a tablet. "Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes. My name is Isabel Chen. I'm sorry to disturb you. I've been trying to reach you for almost a week. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I don't believe I have." She glanced at the nameplate beside the door. "You're still listed as the managing trustee." I frowned. "Managing trustee of what?" She looked genuinely surprised. "The Whitmore Hospitality Growth Fund." For several seconds, I simply stared at her. That fund hadn't crossed my mind in nearly 18 years. I had almost forgotten it existed. Then Isabel said something that made me forget the pain in my hip completely. "We're about to decide who receives the expansion financing, and your son's company just submitted the largest loan request we've ever received." The hallway suddenly felt very quiet, because Daniel had no idea. The man he refused to lend $200 to was sitting in the only chair that could approve or reject the loan application he desperately needed. I hadn't attended a board meeting in almost 11 years, not because I wasn't welcome, because I believed younger people should make their own decisions. Apparently, they had. Very well, the Whitmore Hospitality Growth Fund had grown far beyond anything I imagined. When I helped establish it, there were 12 independent restaurants sharing purchasing costs and emergency financing. Now, there were more than 300 hotels, resorts, restaurant groups, food distributors. The fund wasn't a bank. It never advertised. It existed for one reason. When promising hospitality businesses needed expansion capital, traditional banks called them risky. We looked at operators instead of collateral. That philosophy had created dozens of successful companies, including my son's. Isabel noticed I hadn't spoken. "You seem surprised." I thought I retired." She smiled politely. "You retired from daily operations. You never resigned as managing trustee." I frowned. "I don't remember." "Most founders don't. They assume someone replaces them. Nobody ever did." She opened her tablet. "The bylaws require your signature for any request exceeding $50 million. I looked up sharply. "How much is Daniel asking for?" She turned the screen toward me. "Request financing, $68,400,000. I almost laughed. My son wouldn't lend me $200. But he was asking strangers for $68 million. "What kind of expansion?" I asked. Isabel opened another presentation. Luxury dining complexes, airport restaurants, hotel partnerships, international franchises. Daniel wasn't opening one restaurant. He wanted to build an empire. The proposal looked impressive, professional, expensive, confident. Then I noticed something unusual. No mention of debt reserves, no emergency liquidity, no contingency planning. Only rapid growth, fast growth, aggressive growth. I quietly closed the file. "When's the review?" "Thursday morning. I'll be there." On Wednesday evening, Claire stopped by my apartment carrying homemade soup. Unlike Daniel, she never asked for anything. She simply checked whether I needed groceries or help carrying laundry while I recovered. She noticed the thick binder sitting beside my chair. "Working?" "A little." She smiled. "You always look happier reading financial reports than watching television." I laughed. Probably true. Then she noticed the company logo. Her smile disappeared. "That's Daniel's." I nodded. "He knows." "I don't think so." Claire looked uncomfortable. "Dad, please don't punish him because of the medicine." "I'm not. I wouldn't." She sat quietly for a moment, then whispered something I wasn't expecting. "I don't think Daniel's doing very well." "What do you mean?" She sighed. "He isn't buying trucks because he's rich. He's buying them because he wants everyone to think he's rich." The next morning, the boardroom overlooked the river. 9 trustees, 8 of them considerably younger than me. When I entered, every conversation stopped. One trustee actually stood. "Mr. Whitmore, we didn't know you were attending." I wasn't either. Soft laughter filled the room. The chairman welcomed me warmly. "It's good to have the founder back." Founder, I hadn't heard that word in years. Daniel arrived 10 minutes later. He walked confidently into the room, still speaking on his phone. Then he looked up. His face changed instantly. "Dad?" The room fell silent. He looked from me to the chairman, then back again. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, the chairman smiled. "I didn't realize you two were related." Daniel forced a laugh. "He's my father." The chairman looked genuinely pleased. "Then today must be special." He turned toward the rest of the board. "For those who never met him, this is Arthur Whitmore, the man who created this fund." Every trustee applauded. Daniel didn't. He couldn't, because for the first time, he realized he hadn't come to ask strangers for money. He had come to ask his father. The presentation lasted almost 90 minutes. Daniel spoke brilliantly. Market forecasts, revenue projections, expansion strategy, brand positioning. Every answer was polished. Every chart looked impressive. When he finished, the room applauded. The chairman smiled. Excellent presentation. Then he looked toward me. Arthur, you've been unusually quiet. I nodded. I only have one question. Daniel smiled confidently. Of course. I opened the proposal. Turned to page 74. What happens if tourism drops 15% during your first expansion year? Daniel answered immediately. It won't. I smiled politely. That wasn't my question. The room became very still because everyone there knew good operators answer difficult questions. Great operators prepare for them. And my son had just given the only answer that guaranteed the meeting was about to become much harder. Daniel's smile faded. He looked at the financial model again, then back at me. We've projected steady growth. I know. That wasn't my question. Silence. The other trustees didn't interrupt. They simply waited, because this wasn't about embarrassing an applicant. It was about discovering whether he'd built a business or a fantasy. Daniel took a breath. If tourism falls, we'll reduce expansion. How? We'll delay hiring. Which locations? He stopped. For the first time during the presentation, he didn't have a prepared answer. I closed the binder. Mr. Chairman, may I ask the operations team a few questions instead? The chairman nodded. Please. 3 executives accompanying Daniel straightened in their chairs. I smiled at the young woman seated nearest the projector. How long have you been Chief Financial Officer? 4 years. How much unrestricted cash will remain after Phase 1? She answered immediately. 8.3 million. Good. I looked at another executive. How many suppliers are dependent on 90-day payment terms? 32. And if revenue slows, we'd have to renegotiate. Every answer came quickly, professionally. They knew the business very well. Then I looked back at Daniel. You hired good people. He nodded. I did. They understand the risks. Another nod. They do. So why doesn't the CEO? The room became painfully quiet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to save him from something far worse than rejection. Success is built on confidence alone. Honvolum. The chairman called for a short recess. Trustees walked toward the coffee station. Daniel followed me into the hallway. Dad, I know what this looks like. No, I don't think you do. He lowered his voice. You're making this personal. I looked directly at him. No, you made it personal at the pharmacy. He looked away. I said I was busy. No, you said $200 was too much. His shoulders stiffened. I couldn't keep helping everyone. I wasn't everyone. I was your father recovering from surgery. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, I didn't think it was that serious. I smiled sadly. You never asked. The meeting resumed. The trustees reviewed every page, every projection, every assumption. Finally, the chairman looked around the table. We're ready to vote. 9 voting cards were placed face down. Mine remained untouched, the chairman noticed. Arthur, I'm not voting. Daniel looked confused. The chairman frowned. Why? Because I'm his father. I founded this fund so businesses would be judged on merit, not family. If I vote, whether it's yes or no, the integrity of this decision disappears. The room fell silent. One trustee slowly smiled. I moved that Mr. Whitmore recuse himself. Another immediately agreed. The motion passed unanimously. I quietly stood, collected my notes, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned back. One piece of advice. Everyone looked up. Don't lend him $68 million. Several trustees exchanged surprised looks. Then I continued. Lend him 20. The chairman blinked. What? Approve 1 region, not 6. Let him prove the model. If it succeeds, you'll gladly finance the rest. If it fails, 300 other businesses won't pay for one man's ambition. Then I left. I spent the afternoon sitting beside the lake behind my apartment, watching ducks glide across the water. Around sunset, my phone rang. It was the chairman. Arthur, the board accepted your recommendation. I smiled. I hoped they would. Daniel isn't happy. He shouldn't be, but he'll survive. The chairman laughed softly. You know what impressed us most today? What? It wasn't your financial analysis. It was the fact that you refused to vote. He paused. In 32 years, I've never seen anyone walk away from that much influence. I looked across the lake. My son already thinks I wanted revenge. The last thing I intend to do is prove him right. I ended the call, And for the first time since standing in that pharmacy, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction. Hope, because for the first time in years, Daniel wasn't being handed everything he wanted. He was finally being given something much more valuable. A chance to earn it. The board approved $20 million, not 68, 20. Enough to expand carefully, enough to prove the model, enough to protect every other member of the fund if things went wrong. Daniel accepted the decision without smiling. He shook hands, collected his presentation binder, walked out. Not once did he look at me. 6 months passed. We didn't speak, not because either of us was angry anymore, because we were both busy. He was building. I was healing. Every month, the fund received operating reports from companies it financed. Most trustees skimmed them. I read every page. Daniel's reports were different now. No exaggerated forecasts, no impossible promises. Each report listed mistakes, unexpected costs, lessons learned. The business was growing, slower than he'd wanted, but healthier. One autumn afternoon, Claire invited me to lunch. Halfway through the meal, she smiled. Daniel's changed. In what way? He actually listens now. I laughed. That'll be the day. I'm serious. He cancelled 2 new restaurant openings. Why? He said. She searched for the exact words. I'd rather build 1 great location than 5 weak ones. I quietly stirred my coffee. Those words didn't sound like the son who had stood in the pharmacy. They sounded like someone finally learning patience. 3 weeks later, my apartment buzzer rang. When I opened the downstairs door, Daniel was standing there, alone. No expensive suit, no luxury watch, just jeans, a faded company polo shirt, and 2 paper coffee cups. I wasn't sure if you'd answer. I wasn't sure either. He handed me 1 cup. We sat on the balcony overlooking the river. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I need another loan. I looked at him, not surprised, just curious. For the business? He smiled. No. I waited. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside was a cashier's check, $214, exactly what my medication had cost, plus another small receipt, interest, calculated from the day he'd refused me. I looked up. What is this? The loan. I've been thinking about it every day. He swallowed hard. You asked me for help. I acted like you were asking for a fortune. I've never been more ashamed of myself. He pushed the check toward me again. I can't change that day, but I can refuse to pretend it didn't happen. I smiled, then pushed the check back across the table. I'm not taking it. His face fell. No. You finally understand what the debt was. It was never about $200. It was about whether your father mattered. His eyes filled with tears. I know. I didn't deserve another chance. Probably not. But neither did I when I was 38. He looked confused. I laughed quietly. You think I never made mistakes? I nearly bankrupted my first business. I ignored my own father for almost a year because I thought I knew everything. I was lucky. He forgave me before it was too late. I stood slowly, walked inside, and returned carrying an old metal cash box. Daniel recognized it immediately. The restaurant. I nodded. Inside were yellowed receipts, original menus, the lease agreement for his first location. Then I handed him 1 folded piece of paper. He opened it. It was the withdrawal slip from my retirement account, the exact amount I'd emptied 21 years earlier, every dollar that had financed his first restaurant. Across the bottom, my late wife's handwriting. One day he'll understand this wasn't an investment, it was trust. Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. He cried like he hadn't cried since we buried his mother. The following spring, the Hospitality Growth Fund held its annual conference. Owners from hundreds of restaurants attended. Young entrepreneurs filled the ballroom. The chairman stepped onto the stage. Our keynote speaker this year requested no introduction. He smiled. He insisted someone else deserved it. Daniel walked to the microphone. He didn't begin with revenue. He didn't begin with expansion. He held up a copy of the withdrawal slip. When I was young, I thought success meant getting bigger. I was wrong. He looked directly toward me, sitting quietly near the back. The greatest investment ever made in my company wasn't money. It was the man who believed in me after everyone else said no. Then he told the audience about the pharmacy, about the truck, about the board meeting. about refusing his own father over $200. The room became completely silent. Finally, he said, "If you ever become successful enough to forget the people who carried you, you've already failed." Hundreds of business owners stood and applauded, not for me, not for Daniel, for the lesson. As everyone left that afternoon, dozens of young entrepreneurs stopped to shake my hand. One of them smiled and said, "Mr. Whitmore, I hope if I ever become as successful as your son, I'm wise enough not to make the mistake he did." I smiled. So do I, because fortunes can build restaurants, but gratitude builds families.